So when did we all become socialists? That's the question from the New York Times Magazine this last Sunday. And the answer is we're not all socialists. Maybe you in the newsroom have gone all socialist, but America has not gone all socialist. This last weekend, I was at CPAC, and I decided to break off and go into one of the smaller conference rooms because there was a speaker that I wanted to hear, and his name is Justin Haskins, and he was very funny and just really sharp on socialism and the Green New Deal. He's written for The Blaze regularly. He also is a contributor for the Washington Examiner and also columnist for townhall.com. Welcome to the program, Justin. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Glenn.
You bet. I wanted to go over the 5 myths of socialism. I don't know if you saw this from the Washington Post.
I did.
Yeah, and also when did everybody become socialist from the New York Times? Can you answer that one?
Yeah, sure. I don't think everyone has become socialist, as you pointed out. I think that we're living in a time when socialism is clearly on the rise, especially among young people. And I imagine that if you spent all of your time living in the sort of Greenwich Village, New York bubble that the writer of this particular article that you're referencing does, then yeah, I'm sure everyone seems like they're socialists. But if you go out to, Iowa or something, I'm sure you're going to find a lot of people who do not believe in Karl Marx's ideology. It's on the rise, but it's definitely not something that we that you could say is quintessential America.
Yeah.
No question about that.
So let me give you the 5 myths about socialism, because you just wrote a new book about socialism, and for the name escapes me. I'm sorry. It's the name of it.
Socialism is Evil. Pretty easy book to remember.
Yeah, pretty easy. I haven't read it yet, and I want to have you on next week to talk about it after I've had a chance to read it. But you're pretty clear on socialism. You were very clear and very funny about the Green New Deal on how this is clearly just socialism. It has nothing to do with green energy or anything else.
Correct. Yeah. The Green New Deal is the most radical, dangerous, destructive policy proposal in modern American history. It is a socialist Trojan horse without any question at all. And the obvious way to realize that this is the case is that if you really believed that we were about to head into some sort of post-apocalyptic hellscape 100 years into the future, or that 12 years from now we're all going to be dead, as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez suggested not too long ago, then you wouldn't waste a single penny of taxpayer money on things like a federal jobs guarantee or land use practices for farmers or basic income programs or free college tuition or upgrading homes for safety and comfort. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The Green New Deal is full of socialist programs. Climate change is just a convenient excuse the left uses, especially Democratic Socialists, to enact all of the programs that they've always wanted to enact, with or without climate change.
You said this, Justin, and it just struck me as so true that if you are really, truly, like Ocasio-Cortez, says we only have 12 years before we're all dead, before this thing is just out of control, you wouldn't talk about anything else. Nothing else. Your whole campaign, your whole life would be centered around that.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's sort of like, in New York City, I know you've spent some time in New York City, so you know this. You go to Times Square and you see a guy on the side of the road in Times Square with an old pizza box that says, "The end is here," The end of the world is about to come. It's like he's there every single day and the end of the world never comes. But then it would be like if he started taping another little small sign next to it saying, "Oh, and rent is too high." It's right. Does it matter if rent is too high, if the world is about to end?
Right.
That's where we're at.
That was one of the things with the sort of the FAQ that was attached to the Green New Deal when it came out, and they were so embarrassed about it, and they hid it right away.
Right.
And it said stuff like, let's get rid of airplanes. And Ocasio-Cortez went on Twitter, it's like, I like to fly to Puerto Rico, and I'm not saying that Well, why aren't you saying it? You're saying the entire Earth is going to disintegrate in a decade. Why would you want to fly to go see your family? You can't call them? Why are you even going to Washington, D.C. to vote on these things? You can't come up with a system to vote on the internet? It's completely ridiculous. It's so clear that this is just something, and you've talked about this, Glenn, and I think you have as well, Justin, is like, it's this concept of perpetual constant war. We can't always have a World War I or World War II to get people to do what we want. We need to come up with something, and the environment is it, where it's this constant war all the time. We can always bend the rules. We can always take more power because things are always dire. We're always teetering on that cliff of the Earth just going away. So, of course, we can justify anything.
Well, look at how much just the Patriot Act changed this country. Think of that. Patriot Act completely changed us, changed our theories of privacy and security entirely. And you just put one of those in because you're in a new war. You put this new Green Deal Act in, and it will change us more than the Patriot Act. Would you agree with that, Justin?
Oh, totally.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the best from a socialist perspective, the best part about the Green New Deal is because it's dealing with climate change, it's always 80 years off into the future or something. Mm-hmm. You can always say, oh, well, we just got the prediction, the model a little wrong. But 20 years from now, it's going to be chaos. And then 20 years comes and nothing happens. And 20 years from now, it's going to be chaos. You can always predict it off into the future and just say, yeah, this is a problem that's going to happen. I know it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to. Trust me. And because the media all backs it, everyone just goes along and believes it.
So one of the myths that they bring up from the Washington Post is that all socialists want to abolish markets and private property, and that's just not true. They just want a little more control on a few things that really matter.
Right. Yeah, I think in the short term, there are certainly socialist parties and groups that are not advocating for the end of private property tomorrow. But every single one of them has the same goal, the utopian goal that they're all looking for, that Karl Marx was talking about 150 years ago, is the same. It's we want to live in a world where there is absolutely or no classes at all, which means no groups of people with different amounts of wealth. Everybody has the same amount of wealth. That's what we want. And every socialist party, even the Democratic Socialists of America, were very careful to say on their website, we don't want to abolish property tomorrow. Say, eventually, though, we would like to abolish private property. I mean, that would be great. So they're all working towards that same cause. It's not true that there are socialists out there who say, we like capitalism, but just we want some controls on it. No. They want to abolish property. They want to abolish private property. They want it to be completely controlled by the collective. It's just a matter of how long they're willing to wait to have this happen, and how extreme they're willing to be at this very moment.
What's the strongest message that we can deliver to people who think that socialism is neat and it's probably some sort of an app?
Right. I think the strongest message that conservatives can give, and it's something that, frankly, conservatives have been incredibly terrible at this over the past few decades, is we have this tendency to obsess over economics and then just cede the moral high ground entirely on this issue. And so we spend all of our time talking about, we got to lower tax rates and, we need GDP growth. And it's like, you know what? Those things are not the most important things in the world. The most important things in the world are individual freedom, unalienable rights. I have the right to my property, to my life, to live my life the way I see fit, not to have some majority or some bureaucracy somewhere decide how I'm going to live my life. And that those are the conversations that we need to have, that conversation about natural law. Where do my rights come from? Do they come from the government or do they come from somewhere else? We're not even having those conversations. We're not even on the edge of those conversations in common discourse. We're too busy fighting over these minute little issues that at the end of the day don't matter. What really matters is, can we focus on individual liberty and personal freedom, or should we have a society where the collective decides everything, and if you happen to be in the minority, well, then too bad for you.
That's the thing that bothers me the most. I mean, you look at slavery. The majority could have voted for slavery. In fact, the Supreme Court said slavery was okay. It wasn't. Even if you're in a democratic socialist market, if you will, if the majority votes that you have to do something, that's still slavery. I don't care if everybody else voted for it. You didn't. It's still slavery.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, when the country was founded, this was one of the debates that the loyalists had with those who were the patriots, the people who wanted to move away from England. They basically said, look, why should I trade one tyrant, 3,000 miles away, for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away? That whole quote, that was in the Patriot, and Mather Byles likely said it, a Massachusetts pastor. I mean, that whole notion of, democracy can be tyranny too. Yeah, we have this obsession in America over democracy, like democracy is somehow this inherently good thing. Democracy is not inherently good. Democracy can be evil. What is inherently good is individual liberty coupled with democracy. That system works, and that is totally incompatible with socialism, because socialism doesn't allow for individual rights.
I mean, Hezbollah was democratically elected. Democracy on its own is not necessarily great. Let me take one more thing here with you, Justin, because I agree with you and your criticisms on where the left is going. Let's point inward a little bit here, though. I think quite often we on the right it's easy to be principled when you're in the minority. It's easy to be principled when things are going your way, but when things hit you. We talked about several examples over the past couple of weeks where it feels like you're really getting screwed, and I just need a little bit more power from the government to be able to enforce this thing that I want. See, this thing, though, is a real problem, and I really need the extra power this time. Yes, the Constitution, but this is too important. How do you... I don't feel like people in those moments typically are able to bring themselves back to those principles that really have guided the country the entire way.
Yeah, you're exactly right. What we need the biggest opportunity that was missed by Republicans, and there were a lot of opportunities missed over the past couple of years, was this idea of embracing the freedom to fail. Okay, yep. The country was established as very different communities with completely different ideas, very different than the states that we have today. And yet it worked because they were willing to say to each other, we know that we're different, but we're going to allow each other with some constraints. We're going to allow each other to live the way we believe is right. We're not going to impose those beliefs on each other. That's why we have state constitutions and state rights. And we have totally moved away from that, both in the Republican Party and in the Democratic Party. And now it seems like every 4 years, the world is about to end for somebody, because we're going to have this incredibly important election where we're about to elect some imperial president who's going to make all of our decisions for us. And then he gets to appoint a couple of open seats to the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court's going to decide by a 2-vote margin what liberty means for 330 million people. Mm-hmm. Does this sound like a free society?
No,
not at all.
Not at all. Justin, we'll have you back next week. We want to talk a little bit about your new book. It's called Socialism Is Evil. And if you've ever read Justin, or you've ever listened to him speak, this is the first time you could see he has a great sense of humor and very well read. Justin Haskins, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks.
All right. Let me tell you about Simply Safe.